The wind had not yet woken. Dawn shimmered faintly upon a sea without water, an ocean of gold and silence. The desert stretched beyond sight, soft and endless, the horizon breathing like something alive. Each dune curved as if it had been sculpted by memory itself, shaped not by time but by the slow exhalations of forgotten gods. It is said that the desert remembers everything. Even when it appears empty, it holds what the world has chosen to forget: the bones of cities, the pulse of vanished empires, the hush of prayers once carried on the breath of caravans. Beneath the surface, there are ruins folded within ruins, stairways that descend into nothing, and walls whose inscriptions glow faintly when the moon leans low. Somewhere within this sacred stillness, a lone traveler stands at the threshold of dawn. His footsteps make no sound, for the sand has grown used to silence. He carries no compass, only a tattered journal, its pages yellowed, its ink trembling from age. On the first page, a single line reads, "The dunes remember." He has followed this phrase across continents, through libraries where dust was thicker than air, through temples where the last priests forgot the words to their prayers. And now he has reached the place where the earth itself seems to breathe. As the sun rises, it reveals not just light, but texture. Waves upon waves of shimmering gold, each ridge like a pulse in a sleeping creature. The air hums faintly, a sound too soft to be wind. Some believe that these dunes conceal the remnants of an empire older than Egypt, older even than the written word. An empire that thrived when the Sahara was not a desert, but a cradle of lakes, rivers, and green valleys. Scientists call it the Green Sahara period, a time when grasslands rolled across North Africa, when fishermen cast nets in freshwater seas, and when stone temples stood among acacia trees. But the legends go further. They speak of a city built of alabaster and sound, whose towers glowed at dusk as if lit from within. Its people were said to be listeners, scholars who studied the movements of wind and the language of sand. They believed that the desert spoke, that its shifting patterns were not chaos but communication. Messages written by the earth in grains of gold. And then, as if silenced by its own creation, the city disappeared. No war, no fire, just a long exhale, and the sand rolled back over the stones. At sunset, the plain glows with a color that cannot decide between gold and rose. The traveler sits at the quiet center, and the air around him cools like poured water. He listens. The wind is not a voice, yet it speaks in patterns: 3 beats, a pause, 3 beats again, as if walking a portico that is no longer here. He finds himself counting. The number matches the pillars of a courtyard in a city that may never have been. He smiles at his own devotion to the invisible and lets the numbers go. A lark crosses the sky, a small, dark syllable written on a page of light. The first star appears, then its companion, then a third above the low band of west. Some believe the old columns were aligned to stars now shifted from their ancient thrones, that the city kept the sky's calendar in stone. If so, the heavens have turned the page, and the alignment is elsewhere. The pillars, if they still stand, hold up only darkness and dust. He lies back and presses his ear to the ground. Beneath the cool skin of the desert, the earth is neither loud nor mute. It is simply present, a deep, oceanic hum that might be the memory of rivers or the weight of mountains thinking. He breathes with it until his heart and the plain come to a single, slow agreement. In that calm he sees, not with his eyes, the city as it ended. A hush, a bowing, a release. Doors that were never slammed, only left. Lamps that were not extinguished, only allowed to finish their small suns. Hands that touched pillars a last time, the way one touches a friend's shoulder when words are unnecessary. A gate unlatched, a threshold crossed, stone returning to the place beneath names. There is a tenderness to vanishing when it chooses quiet ways. Not every disappearance is a loss. Sometimes it is a form of keeping. A secret held inside the body of the world so that it cannot be broken by careless mouths. The traveler understands this. He has taken notes for many years and has begun to value what can't be written down. Moonlight lifts over the plain. The sand becomes a pale sea. Somewhere the faintest chime sounds. perhaps a bit of wind against a shard of mineral, perhaps only a nerve in the ear catching a memory of bells. It is enough. He knows he has arrived at the right absence. He stands, smooths the sand where he lay, and leaves no mark. The road back is not a line but a willingness. He carries away nothing but a thinner pulse, a softer gaze, a scent he cannot name that clings to the cuffs of his sleeves, spice, stone, and something like rain. He will sleep and wake and, in waking, carry this quiet with him as one carries water in a deep jar. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Some cities require the same permission. It may be that, far below, a column still rises in the dark, and that a lizard sleeps on its ledge as the seasons turn above. It may be that an inscription curves along the base, a blessing to travelers who will never read it. It may be that all this has dissolved into a geometry of dust, beautiful because it refuses to be held. The desert does not deny either path. It is a patient keeper of perhaps. Before he goes, the traveler turns once more to the open, unreadable plain and lifts his palm in a small salute to what is not there. The gesture is an old one among pilgrims, a way of saying, I will not demand your face. I will not insist on your name. I will carry the space you left as though it were a lamp. Archaeologists have searched for traces. Pottery shards near Nabta Playa, buried walls along the ancient riverbeds that once cut across Egypt and Libya, petroglyphs of boats carved into mountains hundreds of miles from any sea. Some say these are echoes of that forgotten empire, the first architects of time. He steps away. Night gathers the color from the world, leaving the shapes to dream. Behind him, the city that vanished without a sound continues to keep its promise. There is no rubble to stumble over, no wall for the wind to quarrel with, no gate to hang crooked, only a level breath, moving in and out of the earth, as steady as sleep. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps its truest gift is this: to teach the heart how to bow without a witness, how to endure without a monument, how to let the last word be silence. Sacred, oceanic, veiled. Somewhere, deep in the buried chambers of limestone and salt, a pillar receives the weight of darkness as a temple receives prayer. Above, the stars turn their old wheels. Below, the city remains what it has learned to be, a secret held kindly. When the wind rises toward dawn, it will erase even the thought of footsteps. The plain will shine like a page prepared for a new hand. But the story will go on, unwritten and true, lodged where stories most desire to live, in the quiet between breath and breath, where all that is crumbled becomes a gate, and all that is lost becomes a light one carries inward. And if, one night, you pass this way in your sleep, you may feel the faintest coolness on your face, as if a colonnade still throws shade. Do not try to see. Let the unseen do its work. Walk softly. Listen more than you look. Somewhere at the edge of hearing, a market bell will tremble. A jar will leave its moon upon the stone, and a city that chose silence will rise, for a moment, like a tide that does not make a sound. The night loosens its dark silk, and a pale edge of dawn gathers in the east like a held breath. Across the sleeping quarter of the desert, shapes rise that the moon has thinned to ghosts. Long backs of stone, narrow fins, ribs of earth showing through a skin of dust. The traveler arrives at first light, and for a moment believes he is standing within a skeleton so vast it could be the remains of the world itself. Wind moves through these ribs with a sound like the sea forgetting its own name. It is said this place was once an oceanic plain. Some call it a wind farm of the old gods, others a boneyard of time. Geologists speak softly, and with a tenderness that fits the hour. Yardongs. Rock spines carved by centuries of breath. Tafoni. Honeycombs of stone where salt and air have patient conversations. Fossil beds. Whale bones and fish vertebrae sleeping far from any tide. The traveler has heard of valleys where ancient seas left their signatures in limestone, where vertebrae the length of doorways rest under veils of sand. He thinks of the phrase he wrote long ago, "The dunes remember." Here, the rock remembers too, and it remembers in the shape of wind. He walks among the forms. Some rise like prows of ships turned inland. Others kneel like camels at rest. Here, A thin blade of stone casts a blade of shadow. There, a flat back offers a cool bench to the day. The surfaces are smooth where the wind has polished them, pitted where salt once loved them. Each curve is a sentence finished slowly. Each hollow is a word withheld. The air carries the soft, mineral scent of night cooling on stone. As the traveler walks deeper into the dunes, mirages bloom at the edge of sight. It is said there were people here before the pyramids could spell their first light. They lived when rain still visited, when reeds edged shallows, when stars were named not by empire but by need. Their tools were sun and patience. Their materials what the land agreed to lend, wood and hide, yes, but also bone. The traveler remembers a museum glass case in a city far away. Fishbone needles, gazellebone awls, combs carved with small, repeating spirals. A flute no longer voiceful. The gentle curve of a tool haft polished by a palm that loved its work. Bone, he thinks, is a covenant between breath and earth. What remains after the leaving, still shaped by the life it held. When the wind moves, the land here seems to lean in and listen. When the wind rests, the shapes take on a devotion of their own, holding their postures the way monks hold the long note of silence. The traveler places his hand on a smooth flank of stone and feels nothing at first. Then, slowly, a temperature, a memory of yesterday's sun. He breathes with it as he has learned to do. The desert answers only in slow languages. At the foot of one long spine, half buried in a fold of dust, he finds a small object that is not stone. A sliver the color of old ivory. He brushes it clear and sits back on his heels. It is a rib, perhaps from a desert ungulate long gone from this quarter, perhaps from a hunter's meal, perhaps from something older the wind has walked upward. The rib bears marks along its edge, shallow runnels placed at intervals. Not teeth, not chance. He counts them under his breath. The spacing is not even, yet there is a rhythm. He knows the feeling, the body deciding where a tally ends and a prayer begins. He thinks of other countings. At Nabta, stones stood in rings, measuring the sky with a patience only stone can afford. Elsewhere, in caves and on cliff faces, lines of animals run as if chased by light, their flanks a grammar of grace. In oases now retired into memory, small graves were lined with shells from distant waters, each shell a spoken wish for the one laid down. People carved to notice, people carved to keep. Some believe there were artisans here who did not fight the wind, but worked with it as with a partner in a slow dance. They chose the soft shoulder of a spine, measured the morning shadow with their bodies, and began to carve not an idol, but a permission. A curve the wind could learn, a fold it would take up and finish in its own time. These artisans understood that to make is often to listen. They left no names. Their signatures are the places where the land seems almost too graceful for chance. The traveler moves deeper into the field of forms. The sun climbs, and the colors thin to pale honey and milk. Between two long ridges lies a hollow like the palm of a giant hand. In its center, aligned east and west, stand three stones no taller than his knee. They are not pins driven into the earth. They are not fallen teeth. They have been placed. He knows it the way one knows a bed recently slept in by the tenderness of the impression. Upon the middle stone, the surface has been smoothed, and along its edge someone has incised a spiral that turns in upon itself 3.5 times before it fades. The spiral curls the way incense does. He thinks of breath, of star maps, of the curl of a sleeping child's hand. It is said that bone was once laid upon such stones to be shaped, not under hammers but under sun. Bone softened by water will bend if asked and if the asking is kind. A maker might place a rib while dawn is still a question, weight it with pebbles, mark the slow arc of the day with small scores, and return in the evening to see how light has entered the work. The desert takes its time, but it does not ignore a careful hand. Bone remembers the bend long after the bending is finished. He removes his pack and takes out the journal he has carried through years of listening. He draws the 3 small stones with a blunt, respectful pencil. He adds the spiral. He allows his hand to tremble. There is a sweetness in admitting how much one does not know. Across the hollow, A long fin of stone throws a thin shade. He crosses into it and sits, grateful for the way coolness feels like forgiveness. From here, the field of forms resembles a procession. In the near distance, a shape lifts that could be a face. A nose worn down to a soft wedge, an eye hollowed where salt has asked quiet questions. Beside it, a long rib of rock arcs out like an arm reaching. The traveler does not call them statues. He does not name them at all. He allows them to be what they are, lessons in what wind and time know of sculpture. A memory arrives unbidden. A desert herder telling him years ago that the wind is a teacher of modesty. It will finish whatever you begin, the man had said, smiling into his scarf. So choose well what you start. The traveler smiles now, alone, and nods to the stone faces that are not faces, the arms that are not arms. He imagines those early artisans stepping back from a day's small work and watching the air continue the carving into the night. To work with a companion you cannot see. This is a kind of faith. A staircase descends into sand, then vanishes. Midday draws near. Heat gathers without haste. The wind thins. The voices of grain against grain lower to a whisper. The traveler drinks, then spills a little onto the ground as his teachers taught him, a portion for what cannot drink. He ticks lines in his journal not to prove a theory, but to honor the hours. He writes, "Some sculptures are not objects but agreements." He underlines the sentence once. The pencil leaves a faint shine on the page where the graphite is newer than the old dust that clings to his fingers. He recalls the fossil valley far to the west where whales lie in their second sleep, vertebrae like rosary beads counting out epochs. Ancients walked among those bones and took what the sea had left. Plate and rib for handle and flute, scapula for a shovel, jawbone for a curve the hand could learn. Nothing stolen, everything borrowed. The traveler loves this restraint, a reverence for what remains. Bone, shaped well, becomes tool. Tool, used well, becomes story. Story told well, becomes breath. The circle completes itself without needing to close. Shadows lengthen. In the cooling light, the stone spines take on colors the noon erases. Bruised lavender, tea rose, the faint green of sage left too long in sun. The wind returns with its library voice and reads quietly from the shelves of the ridges. The traveler closes his eyes and lets the book turn its own pages. In that inward dark, he sees a woman kneeling over a flat stone, coaxing a rib into an arc that will become the curve of a vessel's lip. A boy sits nearby with a bone comb, copying the spiral he has seen in the sky. Someone sings, not to hurry the work, but to keep time with the small, patient motions of the hands. A man pauses to look at a yardong the wind has half finished and touches it the way one touches a doorway before stepping through. The air smells of wet clay drying, of reed smoke, of milk warming in a skin. No one hurries. The evening is allowed to arrive. When he opens his eyes, the field is the same field, and yet changed, as places are when one has allowed memory to walk there. He stands and walks back to the 3 small stones. He lifts a bit of rib and lays it across the smooth middle as a quiet reenactment of an old trust. He does not weight it. He does not mark it. He tells the air without speaking, "Finish this if you wish." The desert has never needed an invitation, yet it appreciates courtesy. A small creature skitters, pauses, writes a brief, elegant sentence in the dust with its tail, and goes. Stars blink in 1 and then 3 and then 7 like beads the horizon remembers how to count. The first chill of night touches the traveler's wrists. He thinks of all the work in the world that does not declare itself as art and yet teaches the same lessons. Stay, listen, remove what is not needed, permit time to be a partner. He thinks of pillars that once lifted prayer, of wells that once held sky, of maps that once burned and then breathed again as dust. He thinks of bone and wind and what both leave, shape. Some believe these wind-born sculptures are omens, warnings the land offers in the only alphabet weather can write. Some believe they are doors, passages to rooms where the earth keeps its earliest drafts. Others smile and say they are only accidents grand enough to remind us we do not require intentions to be moved. The traveler does not argue with any of these. He has learned that truth likes to wear several veils and chooses which one to lift depending on the listener's breath. The moon climbs. Its cold lamp reveals on the far ridge something he has missed. A run of shallow cups pecked into the stone. 5 in a row, then a pause, then 3. He crosses and kneels. The cups hold small pools of darkness where dew will gather by morning. He touches each and hears nothing and hears everything. The counting of days, perhaps, or the marking of a season when birds arrived, or simply a maker learning how to teach the hand to repeat a circle without breaking it. He places his fingertip in the first and feels the slight coolness left by shadow. He places his fingertip in the second and hears someone laughing 1,000 years ago at the pleasure of making the second match the first. He stands very still. The wind drapes and undrapes him. The land hums its low, oceanic hymn. Somewhere or nowhere a bone flute once played. The note is gone now, but the air remembers how to carry it. Before he leaves, he returns again to the palm-shaped hollow. The 3 small stones keep their vigil. The rib he laid earlier glows pale as a moth wing in the moon. He does not lift it. He does not look for a sign. He bows an old bow to what he does not need to know, and to those who taught the wind how to finish a curve. A line of pillars flickers like a mirage of memory. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Some sculptures can only be seen by those who can accept that the artist is the weather. The traveler has come far enough to find that mercy. He walks out the way a tide withdraws, slowly, leaving small shine in the hollows where his feet paused. Behind him, the field of forms returns to its long patience. The wind, with infinite gentleness, takes up the small task he began and goes on carving the bones of the world, grain by careful grain. Perhaps it was never meant to be found, the final line, the signature hidden in the last curl of dust. Perhaps the lesson was only this, that in a land of wind and bone, what endures is the shaping itself. The rest is carried away, like a breath released into starlight, like a prayer allowed to finish being said. By the time dawn returns, the rib may have bent a shade toward the east, or not at all. The 3 stones will still be facing the long road of the sun. The cups will hold a thimble of silver, and across the ribs of the earth, the sculptures of wind will go on receiving the touch they were made for, invisible, constant, sacred, while the bones of quiet people, who asked nothing but to work alongside the weather, become part of the same lesson, folded back into the land that taught them. The traveler will sleep somewhere beyond the first ridge, where the sand breathes softly and the stars write their unhurried script. If you pass through his dream, you may see him lift a hand in greeting to a fin of stone and say, in the language of breath alone. The desert has many languages. Some are spoken through storms, others through shadows, but the oldest of them all is spoken through water, especially water that no longer exists. It is just past dawn when the traveler reaches the hollow known as Bir el Nasi, the well of people who vanished. The name appears only in one map, hand-drawn and centuries old, tucked into a merchant's journal. Beside it, a note. The wells still answer those who listen with thirst. He arrives after walking 2 days through country so flat it feels like the floor of a forgotten sky. The wind, usually restless, has fallen asleep. His footsteps crunch softly in the hush. Ahead, the ground dips, and a ring of stones emerges, circular, deliberate, half buried in gold. At its center yawns a dark mouth, a well long dry, yet not entirely dead. The air grows thicker, warmer, perfumed with dust and sun. He kneels beside it. The stones are warm, their surfaces glazed by centuries of sun. On one of them, he notices carvings, faint spirals, half-vanished symbols of eyes and waves. He traces them with his fingers, feeling the slight vibration that always seems to hum beneath things the desert refuses to forget. It is said that these wells were built in the days when the Sahara still dreamed of rain, when small rivers threaded the dunes, when acacia trees bowed over shallow pools, and when the air carried the scent of things growing. People carved the wells deep, lining them with limestone blocks. Each layer was marked with a sign: water lines, lunar crescents, the outline of a palm leaf, a record not of years but of patience. Later, when the rains withdrew, the people stayed. They believed the water did not vanish. It only sank deeper, waiting for their voices to call it back. So they began to sing. The traveler remembers this legend as he leans over the rim. A cool breath rises from the well, faint as a sigh. He whispers something without meaning to, a word that is neither prayer nor question, only sound. The echo returns, soft and delayed, as though shaped by a hand beneath the earth. He closes his eyes. The silence grows textured, not absence, but fullness. Within it, the faintest tone. A single note, low and round, like a drum beneath water. Then another, higher, distant. The air vibrates. For a moment, the traveler feels dizzy, as if the well's depth is not downward but inward. The sound becomes layered, almost melodic. It is the kind of sound one might hear in dreams, the slow rhythm of something ancient remembering how to breathe. When he opens his eyes, the rim of the well glows faintly in the first touch of sunlight. Dust motes drift like falling stars. He realizes that the carvings along the stone, the spirals, the eyes, align perfectly with the rising sun. At this moment, light strikes one spiral directly, and the sound deepens, as if the well itself is responding. Somewhere in the traveler's memory, a voice speaks. An old desert scholar he met once in a windswept tent. "Water is only the shadow of sound," the man had said. "Before the earth yields it, it must first remember the song." The traveler sits beside the rim, notebook forgotten, and simply listens. He pauses beside what looks like a half-buried stone. Smooth, carved, deliberate. Brushing away the sand, he finds markings. Not letters, but spirals, repeated over and over. The spiral, symbol of breath, of creation, of the eternal return. As the day warms, mirages ripple over the hollow, thin veils of light bending reality into memory. Through them, the traveler sees what may once have been. A village around this very ring, its houses woven from reeds and clay, children carrying water jars on their shoulders, women grinding grain by rhythm rather than measure, a dog barking, the laughter of a market where salt was traded for honey, the well at the center, alive, speaking in cool voices. He sees a priest lowering an earthen jar, whispering as it descends, each word a petition for rain. He sees the same man years later, older, thinner, still whispering, though the rope touches only dust. Faith, like thirst, refuses to die quietly. And then, like a mirage folding inward, the image fades. The hollow is empty again, the well silent. It is said that long after the people left, travelers continued to visit the wells, not for water but for counsel. Some swore that when they spoke aloud their grief, the wells replied with a sound that eased it. Others said the wells remembered names, that if you whispered the name of someone lost, the echo would return softer, forgiven. The traveler leans closer. "What do you remember?" he murmurs. For a long while only wind moves through the hollow. Then, faintly, barely there, a note rises from below. Not a voice, not a word, but a tone that carries warmth. Trembles for a few seconds, then fades. He does not know if it was real. Perhaps the heat played tricks on his hearing. Perhaps he only heard his own breath. Yet a calm settles over him, the kind that follows recognition rather than proof. He sits there for hours, the way one might sit beside an old friend. The shadows shift around him, tracing the slow geometry of day. Occasionally he speaks, not with questions, but with fragments of memory. A river seen as a child, a prayer left unfinished, the sound of rain on canvas. Each time, the echo seems to change slightly, as if listening. By evening, the air cools and the desert grows blue. The traveler lights a small lamp beside the stones. The flame flickers, throwing long, soft shapes into the well's mouth. For a moment, he thinks he sees a shimmer at the bottom, like the gleam of wetness, or perhaps just the reflection of the fire. He smiles. Perhaps it was never dry, he whispers. He remembers a passage he once read in an old text, copied from a tomb near Siwa Oasis. It is said that in the oldest tongue of this land, there was no separate word for well and memory. Both were called Alma, meaning the place where something returns. The traveler opens his journal and writes this down. Then he adds another line, slowly, deliberately. Some memories do not need to be found. They need only to be heard. The lamp's flame bends toward the well, its light trembling as if drawn inward. The wind shifts, carrying the faint scent of rain that isn't there. For the first time in years, the traveler feels thirsty, not for water, but for understanding. He closes his eyes again and listens. The desert is not silent anymore. Beneath the sand, beneath the bones of forgotten villages, beneath even the dust of empires, something murmurs. Not words, not warnings. Just the soft pulse of the earth remembering its own origins in water. He imagines the wells speaking to each other through hidden channels, a secret network of breath connecting hollow to hollow, echo to echo. Perhaps the desert is not barren but breathing through them. Lungs of stone that still sigh beneath the surface. The traveler stands and looks once more into the dark. "Thank you," he says. The echo returns, a soft, low hum, almost tender. He turns away as the stars rise, each one reflected faintly on the well's lip like drops of another sky. He begins walking again, not hurried, not lost, guided by something older than direction. Behind him, the hollow glows faintly in moonlight, a bowl of shadow that seems to listen even after he's gone. It is said that the last thing the wells will remember, when all else is dust, is the sound of human voices. Not the words, but the rhythm of breathing, the music of existence itself. All that is buried will rise again, not in form, but in echo. And perhaps that is enough. For the desert, too, drinks not from rivers, but from silence. And silence, once it has spoken, does not die, it only deepens. The desert night stretches like ink poured over a sleeping world. In its stillness, a faint glimmer moves along the horizon, a thread of flickering gold, weaving silently through the dunes. To the waking eye, it could be a trick of heat, a mirage shaped by moonlight. But to those who know how to look, it is something older, quieter, the procession that never ends. The traveler had heard whispers of it years ago, from a Bedouin elder whose eyes had turned to silver with sand and time. There are caravans, the old man had said, that cross no trade route. They walk through centuries, not miles. You may see them once, if the night allows it. And tonight, standing upon a ridge beneath a pale, watching moon, he sees it. Dozens of figures moving in perfect silence. Camels, cloaked riders, and the soft shimmer of fabric that catches moonlight like water. There is no sound of bells, no murmur of voices, only the faint shifting of air as they pass. He steps closer, unsure whether his feet touch the ground or memory. The caravan's line curves like a constellation drawn upon the earth, each figure a star in motion, each step a slow turning of the world. Perhaps that is what this place is, not a grave, but an echo. Some say this is the caravan of shadows, doomed to wander until every forgotten name is spoken once again. Others believe it is not a curse, but a vow, a pilgrimage meant to keep the memory of lost civilizations alive, to ensure their stories continue to move, even when their stones have fallen. The traveler watches as one figure at the head of the procession raises a lantern. Its flame is small, yet it casts light farther than seems possible, illuminating the sands ahead with a soft golden haze. Beneath that glow, the air thickens, not with dust, but with remembrance. He steps into their path. No one looks at him, yet none pass through him either. They move around him, their eyes hidden behind veils of indigo cloth. He sees their hands, slender, calloused, carrying objects wrapped in linen. Scrolls, amulets, fragments of stone, relics of a world that sleeps beneath the dunes. And then one of them turns, a woman or perhaps something less defined than that. Her face is luminous, not with light, but with reflection, like moonlight rippling on still water. She gestures to him with a movement so slow it feels ceremonial, inviting him to walk beside her. He hesitates only a moment before following. Their pace is not the pace of travelers. It is the rhythm of ritual, steady, eternal. They move as though they carry time itself on their backs. Each step, a breath. Each breath, a prayer. The silence between them is thick, but it is not empty. It hums, low and constant, like the note of a drum buried beneath centuries. They pass through dunes that glow faintly from within, as though lit by the memories of stars buried long ago. In the distance, a faint archway rises, the remains of a gate, half swallowed by sand. The caravan halts before it. The leader, an elder wrapped in white robes faded by dust, dismounts and walks forward. He kneels, presses his palm against the base of the gate, and whispers something that sounds less like language and more like wind remembering how to speak. At midday, the light becomes too fierce to see. The dunes shimmer like molten gold, erasing distance and direction. The traveler shelters beneath a ridge, and from the shadow, the desert seems to move. Dunes shift, and for a moment, brief as breath, he glimpses outlines beneath the sand. Walls, columns, doorways, and then nothing. The air trembles, the sand shifts, and for a moment, the arch stands whole again. Its pillars tall, its carvings glowing faintly with symbols the traveler cannot read. Through its open center, the dunes flicker into something else. Not sand, but a city, dim and luminous, its walls breathing in the night like the chest of a sleeping giant. The caravan begins to move forward again, one by one, through the gate. Each figure enters the light and dissolves, fading as though absorbed by the vision itself. The traveler stands at the threshold, his breath shallow. He looks at the woman with the lantern. She nods once, slow, knowing. He steps forward. The world changes. The air cools. The sand becomes stone. He stands in a vast corridor lined with columns, each carved with faces whose eyes are closed, as if in prayer. The walls glow faintly from within, illuminated by a hidden source of light that feels alive. It is said that the desert is not barren, but dreaming. What we see are its shifting thoughts, flickering at the edge of our perception. Every mirage is a memory half awake. The caravan moves quietly ahead, their silhouettes flickering like candle flames in a long procession. The traveler follows, unable to tell whether he walks within the earth or within a memory of it. He senses layers beneath his feet, centuries folded upon centuries, footsteps upon footsteps. Voices murmur, faint but rhythmic, chanting in a tongue older than the desert itself. The sound echoes through the columns, reverent and circular, like a heartbeat returning to its source. As they move deeper, he begins to see inscriptions along the walls, not in any known alphabet, but in spirals, curves, and shapes resembling waves and wind. Each seems to tell a fragment of the same story, of cities that rose and fell, of rivers that turned to dust, of stars that drifted from their positions in the sky. The carvings pulse faintly as he passes, as though sensing recognition. At the end of the corridor lies a chamber, vast, domed, open to the stars through a perfect circle above. In its center rests a stone platform, and upon it, an object wrapped in silk. The leader of the caravan steps forward, kneels, and unwraps it carefully. It is a tablet, not stone, not metal, but something in between. Its surface shimmers, and across it dance faint etchings like ripples on water. The elder places both hands upon it. The chamber grows utterly still, and then the sound begins, soft, resonant, unmistakably human. Voices layered in harmony, rising and falling like tides. The traveler realizes it is not the tablet that sings, but the air itself, vibrating with the memory of song. The music has no words, only tone. A low, oceanic hum that fills the body rather than the ear. The elder turns to him, eyes luminous in the dim. "This," he says, in a voice that sounds like several voices speaking through him, "is what we carry, not objects, not relics, the remembrance of sound, the first language of the world. We are its keepers." The traveler bows his head, overwhelmed. As the sun begins to fall, the world softens again. The air cools, and the dunes turn from gold to rose, from rose to violet. The traveler resumes his path, though there is no clear path to follow. His shadow stretches long beside him, a quiet companion. When he looks up again, the chamber has begun to fade. The caravan is dissolving into light, each figure becoming a wisp, a breath, a shimmer of dust. The woman with the lantern smiles, or perhaps it is only the play of shadow. "Will I remember this?" he asks. Her voice comes soft, as though from within him. "You already do." And then, she too is gone. The traveler stands alone in the open desert once more. The archway has vanished. The dunes are quiet. Only the moon remains, bright and impartial. Yet beneath the hush, he feels a rhythm. Faint, steady, moving through the sand beneath his feet. He closes his eyes and listens. It is the same melody, soft and patient, weaving through the silence like a thread through cloth. He realizes that the caravan has not vanished. It continues, unseen, beneath the surface of the world, forever walking the lines of memory. Perhaps, he thinks, it is not they who wander, but time itself, circling back upon its own shadow. He kneels and presses his ear to the sand. Night arrives not suddenly, but tenderly, the stars emerging one by one, like old truths returning. The desert grows blue, infinite, almost oceanic. The wind begins to whisper, faintly at first, then stronger, carrying with it voices. Fragments of syllables, perhaps only the sound of sand slipping down the slopes, yet somehow human. The hum deepens. He can almost distinguish voices now, male, female, young, old, all layered into one vast breath. When he stands again, the horizon begins to brighten with the first blush of dawn. The stars retreat, and the night folds itself away, leaving no trace of what had passed. Only the sand holds the imprint, a faint, winding pattern like the curve of a caravan trail. But as the wind stirs, even that begins to fade. The traveler watches it disappear, smiling softly. "Perhaps that is the point," he murmurs. "Some journeys are meant to be remembered by the earth, not by us." He shoulders his pack and begins walking toward the rising sun. The dunes around him hum faintly, as if singing him onward. And behind him, far below the waking desert, the caravan of shadows continues its endless passage, carrying, through the deep corridors of silence, the ancient memory of sound. Dusk lowers like a veil drawn by a careful hand. Along the world's quiet edge, where the dunes meet a band of bruised light, the traveler sees it. Not a building, not a ruin, but a line that is not a line, a seam in the earth that holds its breath. The horizon itself seems to hesitate there, as if remembering a doorway it once concealed. Wind settles, sand hushes, the sky leans close. He stops. It is said there are sanctuaries that chose to kneel rather than rise. Temples without facades, chapels without suns, built not to impress the eye but to steady the soul. In such places, descent is the liturgy. One walks downward to become lighter. One goes into the earth to find sky. The traveler approaches the seam as the first star appears. A single bright seed sown into deepening blue. At his feet, the surface softens, giving way to hard-packed layers where dunes cannot easily rewrite their script. He kneels and brushes aside a thin cover of dust. A stone threshold emerges, narrow, cool, star-marked with tiny fossil shells, the memory of an oceanic age pressed into every grain. Along its lip, carved so faintly the light must learn them, are spirals turning inward, and between them a recurring sign, a small eye half closed. He presses his palm to the stone. The temperature beneath is not night cold yet, but it is not of the day either. It holds a neutral calm, like the inside of a breath. Some believe these buried sanctuaries were built when the sun grew too fierce and prayers required shade to survive. Others say they are older, much older, the relics of a time when people read constellations from inside the earth, letting a single shaft of light strike an altar only on certain mornings of certain seasons. There are whispers of chambers in the limestone of far islands where a passage funnels dawn into a waiting bowl, of honeycombed cities under Cappadocian tuff where wine and grain slept in cool darkness, of catacombs whose walls listen so well the softest hymn returns as a gentle oceanic echo. The traveler has read such pages. He has stood at thresholds with their names. But this seam is unnamed, veiled by the horizon, unclaimed by maps. He finds the entrance cut low, framed by two stones that lean inward like elders sharing a secret. He lowers himself, then slips through on bent knees. Night collects around him, kind and unhurried. The first passage narrows, then curls, a slow spiral that invites rather than traps. The air grows dense with silence, but it is not empty silence. It feels sung through, inhabited by the breath of those who came to listen. He reaches for the small lamp he carries, a clay bowl, a wick braided of linen fiber, oil that smells faintly of crushed leaves. When flame takes, the passage answers with a soft glow, revealing walls laced with shell flecks and mica, tiny stars trapped in stone. He moves his lamp close and sees faint incisions running shoulder-high. Waves, eyes, halved moons, a line of dots like counting and then pausing again. It is said the first law of a true undertemple is that its rooms are tuned, the way a flute is tuned, spaces shaped to catch a human note and return it as something more than itself. The traveler tests the air. Barely above a whisper, he breathes a single ah. The sound slides along the curve, gathers in a hollow, and returns a heartbeat later, rounder, warmer, blessed. He smiles without meaning to. The place approves of softness. The passage opens into a small antechamber no larger than a shepherd's hut. At its center sits a shallow basin carved directly into the floor, its rim rubbed to a gentle shine by hands that knew how to complete circles. He could imagine it once filled with water or with light. Above it, the ceiling dips, then rises to a neat oculus no wider than a hand, a deliberate eye to the sky. Even now, one star shows through, steady as a kept vow. He lowers to sit cross-legged by the basin and slows his breathing. The underworld has its own clock. Above ground, time is a bright, linear thing. Here it is a spiral, drifting inward with each exhale. He counts the breaths it takes for the walls to reveal more marks. 12, 21, 30. Symbols wake like embers. A boat with no water beneath it. A ladder that ends in a crescent, palm leaves. A small bird drawn as if lifting. Listens. The traveler rises and follows a second corridor slanting away from the first like a branch grown in low wind. The stone underfoot is cool now. Here the marks are different. Sequences of short lines clustered around small circles, as if charting a star's wanderings. He remembers a scholar's note, that certain subterranean rooms are arranged so that when a specific star crosses the narrow sky of an oculus, a thread of light will find an altar in the dark. Some temples set their calendars below ground, the footnote read, as though the earth itself needed to witness the sky's appointments. The corridor ends at a threshold without a door. Beyond, a chamber opens, oval, ribbed with shallow niches like the inside of a shell. At its far end rises a platform, not high, more suggestion than hierarchy. On the platform rests an object covered in layers of sand as fine as sifted flour. The traveler approaches and lets his lamp hover. He does not brush it clean with his hand. Instead, he leans and exhales. His breath moves the upper dust in a small weather, revealing an edge, then a curve. With the gentleness one gives to sleep, he continues until a circular stone shows, a disc the size of a plate, carved with closely wound spirals. Not a sun, he thinks, but a breath made visible. He leaves it as he found it, revealed but acknowledged. It is said that in certain forgotten rites, congregations gathered not to speak, but to breathe together, to place their pulse within the room's pulse until a shared rhythm arose that none could claim as their own. In such ceremonies, the leader's role was not to instruct but to keep time with a slow hand, to guard the silence against noise and then release it to bloom. The room holds that memory, he senses, in the way it balances his small lamp with the larger dark, in the way it cools everything it touches without taking heat for itself. He circles the chamber once. In each shallow niche he finds a different sign scratched with the same uncertain hand, as though many contributors added fragments over years. Here a fish, there an eye, here a set of parallel lines, there a cluster of dots resembling a night of meteors. In one, almost erased, a figure with arms raised, drawn not as a person but as a posture. Reception. He thinks of the underworld shrines of other lands, the Maltese chambers with their red ochre spirals singing the soft geometry of life, the soft, pumice-dark vaults of Anatolia, the anchored rooms in desert monasteries where a single lamp keeps vigil. He does not paste names onto this chamber. He lets reference be background music, the way memory scents the air of a familiar place without demanding attention. Light factual threads drift like pollen, settling only where they do not disturb. A second stair, half collapsed, leads down from the platform into a narrower passage. The traveler tests each step with his toes, moving like a thought that does not wish to startle. The air cools further. He can taste limestone and something older than limestone. A mineral sweetness, faint as dew at night. At the bottom, the world becomes quiet in a new way. Sound does not die here. It becomes so patient it feels like touch. The corridor bends twice and then spills him into a chamber smaller than the last, round and low. In its floor, another basin, deeper, dry. Around its rim, the incisions are clearer, concentric rings that tighten toward a center where a hole the size of a coin pierces the stone. He places his lamp on the far side and peers into the hole. No light returns. He listens. After a long moment, he hears something. Not water, not wind, not animals. Only the faintest, most faithful echo of his own breath. It travels, it seems, into a system beneath, a lungwork of cavities one cannot see. Some believe these underrooms are linked, not by corridors, but by sound-tuned basins that send breath as message, chambers that trade echoes like letters. The traveler likes this idea. He puts his lips close to the small opening and lets a tone rise from the back of his throat, low and round. The whole gathers it. The stone receives. The earth replies with a barely audible harmony a half note above. He laughs, very quietly, like someone who has recognized the handwriting on an unaddressed page. Here, beneath the horizon, the temple is not a place but a conversation. He sits at the basin and lets the lamp burn lower. The room accepts dusk within dusk. He thinks of the world above, the spine of dunes, the stars beginning their slow spin, and of the asterism that would be passing the oculus now in the antechamber. There is comfort in knowing both rotations. The endless sky, the contained circle, the great and the intimate turning at the same time. There a pattern, a pulse, as if the earth itself were speaking in rhythm. A thought wanders in, soft-footed. Perhaps sanctuaries go underground not only to escape the sun, but to ask the earth to hold memory for them. Stones forget slowly. Dust, when undisturbed, is faithful. Above ground, names crumble, pillars fall, maps burn. Below, a spiral holds itself together for 1,000 quiet years. He dozes and wakes, not sure which is which, and sees, with the inner eye that opens in such places, people entering this same chamber in other centuries. They touch the rim lightly. They stand at the small opening and hum. They pass a shallow bowl hand to hand, not to drink, but to listen to how it answers their skin. A woman places her cheek against the floor and closes her eyes. A child counts the rings around the hole and stops shy of the center, satisfied. A leader raises a hand and lowers it, and the group breathes together, 12 counts in, 12 counts out, until the differences between them reside not in their voices but in their memories, and the room becomes a single lung. When he opens his eyes again, the lamp has thinned to a steady pearl. He knows it is time to be courteous and leave the rooms to their rest. He lifts the bowl from the floor and presses his lips once more to the small opening. This time he does not send a tone. He whispers only this, "Thank you." The reply is not an echo. It is a presence, the way a hand on your shoulder is not a word but is understood. He rises carefully and retraces his steps. The descent spiral becomes the ascents. The marks on the walls change their meaning now that he is leaving. The halved moons look like boats. The eyes close more completely, in blessing rather than sleep. At the first chamber he stops. The oculus shows a portion of heaven now crowded with stars. One blinks in time with his breath. He sits again by the shallow basin and cups his hands as though to drink. He drinks nothing and feels contented nonetheless. It is said that some sanctuaries offer not answers, but a place where questions are allowed to become beautiful. The temple beneath the horizon has done precisely that. The traveler does not know who built it, what they called their god, which season they honored, or what words they spoke. He does not need to. He has learned again the ritual of slowness, to move like dust settles, to see like eyes in low light, to speak as if sound is precious and must be returned in equal measure to the silence that lent it. At the seam he had first uncovered, he leans and draws a thin layer of sand back over the threshold, not to hide, to bless. Above, the horizon has deepened from bruise to velvet. The first breath of night wind crosses his face and carries the scent of stone cooled to comfort. He steps into the open and the sky widens like a door that has been there all along. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it was meant to be remembered by the body, the way muscles recall a descent, the way lungs recall a harmony, the way hands remember how to cup light. Some places do not ask to be written. They ask to be kept. He does not look back. The temple is beneath him now, beneath the horizon, beneath the sands that travel in their sleep. He begins to walk, and the ground is generous underfoot, and the stars move in their patient spirals overhead. Somewhere beneath his feet, the buried empire is breathing. If you pass this way in your dreams, you may feel it. A coolness rising from the seam of the world, a small pulse in the sand that answers your own. Do not bring a loud voice. Do not bring a bright lamp. Bring only breath, and a willingness to lower your head as if entering a friend's house at midnight. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Some sanctuaries only open when we have learned to be quiet. And some altars, star-marked and veiled, are content to remain what they have always been. A soft chamber inside the earth where dust becomes a prayer and the horizon itself learns how to bow. Dawn loosens a pale ribbon across the dunes, and the wind wakes like a soft instrument tuned in the dark. Out on the open sand, something moves that is not sand. A thin length of linen, ash-colored and frayed, lifting and settling with each quiet breath of the earth. It does not tumble, travels. The traveler watches from a ridge as the fabric crosses a shallow trough and pauses near a cluster of stones, as if a hand has set it down. It is said there are texts that refuse shelves. Some writings do not wish to be bound to cedar or buried beneath clay seals. They prefer the company of dust, the slow grammar of weather. Their script is a migrant species, carrying itself between hands and centuries, changing just enough to survive. He descends, stepping softly, and kneels. The linen is brittle at the edges and pliant in the center, as though the middle remembers water. When he touches it, his fingers come away gray with age and a faint scent rises. Soot, sour ink, and something sweet that might once have been sap. He turns the fabric and a field of faded characters appears, not in tidy columns but in lines that swell and wander like a river in flood. Letters lean into one another as if sharing warmth. Between them, small circles, short slashes, a wandering spiral, and here and there the ghost of an eye. The traveler has met such hands before, though not the hands themselves, only their remnants. A charred page stubborn against the flame, a palm-sized palimpsest whose undervoice still presses upward through newer ink, a torn sheet held in a monastery by spider silk and patience, a bundle of papers saved in a desert room where light fell just so. He has been told of caves where jars waited full of words and of a janaza where no parchment bearing the name of the sacred was allowed to be thrown away, only set aside to sleep. He does not name these places now. He lets them stand like low hills on the horizon of his mind. Factual threads belong here the way stars belong to evening. Present, guiding, not declaring. He kneels and presses his palm against the ground. The sand feels alive, not warm now, but pulsing faintly, as if a slow heartbeat still lingers in the bones below. He lifts the linen with two hands and carries it to a flat rock. He does not smooth it entirely. The page has earned its folds. In the angled light, the ink gathers strength. Not black, but brown where gall met air, and in the faintest strokes a pale sheen where soot once mixed with oil. The script feels familiar without being known. A family of letters in which the vowels hide like small birds in reeds, and the consonants keep the rhythm like steps in sand. Some signs are more picture than letter. A wave, a seed, a breath. He reads without insisting on meaning. The eye moves, the heart listens. Phrases rise the way voices do through a courtyard at dusk. Overlapping, patient, distinct only when you stop trying to separate them. In the year without rain, we wrote on cloth, for the reeds were brittle. Do not bury this. Let it walk. All breath is a kind of ink. Found, carry, but do not keep. The wind shifts slightly and the linen quivers, as if pleased to be heard. A small corner lifts and reveals beneath it a second layer, a fabric stitched to the first with threads so fine, he would have missed them had the light not tilted. He draws the seam gently. The layer beneath bears an older hand, thinner, more angular, its lines spaced for recitation rather than reading. The letters are cousins, but they do not speak exactly the same tongue. He recognizes this as well. A text that has hosted another text, each reluctant to silence the other. A palimpsest not of scraping but of sewing. It is said that the wisest scribes left margins not for commentary but for breath. Small intervals where the voice could gather itself and where silence might stand with dignity. This cloth has such borders worked into its weave. Narrow bands of undyed linen where the eye rests and the hand that wrote chose not to. The traveler touches one and feels a calm that does not argue. The legends tell of a queen who refused to abandon her people when the desert came. When the rivers dried and the air turned to flame, she commanded that their wisdom be sealed beneath the earth, protected from time. Her last decree: we will not be remembered by name, but by wind. He thinks of the ways words have traveled this quarter of the world. On papyrus that held light like water. On leather that warmed with the body's heat. On wood smoothed by a knife and darkened with soot. He has seen ink made of crushed berries and bound with gum, of lampblack and vinegar, of iron and oak galls that bit the page with a sweetness that lasted beyond the hand that wrote it. He has watched a monk wet a clay lamp's wick with his own breath before setting it to flame beside the page. All of this seems to live in the linen. The scroll is an ocean of habits. The traveler lifts the cloth a little so the low sun falls across it. The letters respond. Barely there, but there. He reads. There was a library of wind where nothing stood still. The shelves were moving dunes. The catalog was a song. We wrote the index on our bodies. The back of the hand for travel, the left shoulder for grief, the brow for things we were not ready to learn. Carry the letters outward. When one frets itself away, speak it. Do not mourn the fallen strokes. They have entered the throat. He smiles. It is not joy, exactly, nor sadness. It is the recognition of a companion in a difficult art. How to hold what cannot be held. A hiss crosses the hollow. Not snake. Not grass, only sand speaking in its soft voice. He looks up. Another length of fabric tumbles into view, smaller than the first, a fragment caught on the spine of a stone. He retrieves it and lays it beside the larger piece. This one has been patched from both ends. In its center a diagram floats, 3 circles touching, a narrow ladder on its side, and at the base a line of small eyes. The diagram is labeled in a different hand. Night, breath, return. Below it, a single sentence almost gone. The desert is not empty. It is an archive that has refused walls. When she died, it is said, the sand itself rose like a veil and covered the city in a single night. From then on, the dunes never rested. They shifted endlessly, keeping the empire's secrets moving, as if to hide them from even the gods. He thinks of desert libraries kept in mud-brick rooms, of scholars wrapping books in cloth against sand while riders approached on a horizon of dust, of manuscripts carried under a cloak when the air smelled of fire. He lets the memory rest where it is supposed to rest, not as spectacle but as witness. The linen, too, looks like it has known fire without belonging to it. As he reads on, he realizes the scroll is not one voice but many, a chorus written over years. Some lines instruct, some console, some confess. A scribe writes, I copied this by moonlight, forgive the slant. A traveler adds, I have nothing to trade but a story. A child's hand, confident and round. This letter looks like my mother's eye when she listens. A woman. We stitched our names inside the seam, not to be seen, but to hold the page together. He thinks of names sleeping in margins the way seeds sleep in dry earth. If the rain returns, some sprout. If not, the seed still keeps the shape of water. At noon the light grows harsh. The letters retreat into their shelter. The traveler shades the page with his body, and the words return as evening returns to a courtyard. He reads, "When the temple closed, we unrolled the cloth and breathed upon it so the ink would remember being wet. We carried it through the gate where pillars once burned, and the wind took it. We were not afraid. We had made our peace with being messengers whose names are not recorded in the message." He lifts his head. The corridor of the day narrows to afternoon. Heat shimmers distress the distances. He senses a familiar presence at the edge of sight. Not a figure, not a caravan, only the feeling that things move through the world with purpose we often misread. The wind rises and subsides, the long, slow respiration of the plain. He waits until the hour grows kind again. In the slant light, he rolls the larger cloth upon itself, not tight, not closed, and ties it with a strip of linen torn from his own sleeve. He does not pocket it. He places it on the flat rock and weighs one end with a pebble smooth as a well rim. He sets the smaller fragment inside, like a note between pages. Then he sits beside them and writes in his journal, not copying, only answering. "I have listened. I will carry, but I will not keep. I will walk while words walk. When the wind asks, I will let go." Evening leans in. A pale belt of color turns to violet at the horizon's hem. The first star arrives, unhurried and precise. The traveler lifts the roll, feels its slight weight, and stands. He walks to the ridge and raises the cloth high. The wind takes it gently, as if recognizing an old friend. It does not blow away as trash blows away. It sails a little, then floats, then lands near another low rise and rests there. A pale snake of script asleep in the last light. He follows not to reclaim, but to witness its choosing. At the new resting place, he sees a sign cut shallow in the rock. A spiral, turning inward 3 times and a half, the final curl left open. He lays the cloth upon it. The open curl and the loose end of linen look like kin. The traveler feels a strange calm. The silence is not empty. It is full, like the pause between heartbeats. He lies back, gazing at the sky. It is said some texts require a reader who can be quiet with them while they decide what to do next. A reader who knows that words are living when they can still move. A reader who does not pin butterflies. Night steadies. The world becomes a bowl with a dark, sweet rim. He lights his small lamp and places it a little distance away, so the glow does not insist. He sits with the linen and the spiral and the wind that arranges them. He does not ask for meaning. Meaning is shy in such company. He offers presence instead. In the stillness, something changes that cannot be described. The fabric wrinkles as the air cools. A crease catches lamplight and becomes a line like a river at night. A moth passes and crosses letters that once named breath. Somewhere below the surface of his listening, a phrase completes itself. All writing is a rehearsal for silence. He does not know if he read it or thought it or remembered it from another life. It suits the hour. He sets it beside the others in his mind and feels no need to bind the book. When the lamp gutters, he cups the flame and lets it choose. It chooses to live a little longer, to show him one last thing. A seam he hadn't seen, along the far edge of the cloth, where 2 patches meet. Tiny stitches, irregular, the human kind. Between them, thread the color of sky just before it goes black. He smiles. Somewhere, someone repaired this by starlight. Somewhere, someone made the unbroken. He rises and bows, not to the cloth, not to the letters, but to the life that passed through them. He leaves the scroll where the wind can find it in the morning. He takes only his own breath, and even that he intends to give back. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it was meant to keep moving, like a prayer that refuses a single mouth, like a road that remains a road by being walked. The traveler understands. He steps away, and his footsteps write their brief, vanishing script behind him. A poem the wind edits kindly. If you pass this way in your sleep and see a ribbon of linen cross the sand like a pale river, do not chase it. Walk beside it if you can, and listen for the low song the earth hums when words remember they were once breath. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Some texts only read themselves aloud when the reader is prepared to close the book without closing the story. By dawn, the scroll will be elsewhere, teaching another ridge the trick of remembering. The spiral in the rock will keep its open end, and the night will have done what night does best. It will have turned ink to tide and tide to quiet, leaving in the cooled air a faint sweetness like the last smoke of a lamp, the kind that tells you someone was here and that what they carried still chooses to move. Above him, constellations shimmer, Orion the hunter, forever walking westward. Some of the same stars his ancestors watched from temples now buried beneath his body. In their light, he imagines the lost city still glowing beneath him, its courtyards alive with incense and song, its people raising lanterns to the night sky, their prayers rising like heat. There are nights when the sky feels close enough to touch, a bowl of dark velvet pricked with fire, lowered gently over the sleeping earth. And there are other nights, rarer, stranger, when the heavens step back, and the bowl turns to slate. The traveler reaches such a night at the edge of a salt plain where dunes withdraw like tide, leaving a wide, white hush that remembers an ocean it no longer owns. Wind moves the surface in small shivers. The air is clear. The horizon is a single breath, yet above no stars. It is said this has happened before. Some chronicles speak of a year when the sun itself grew thin, when days were a dim pewter and nights refused to glitter. Others whisper of dust blown so high it learned the language of the upper air and stayed there, veiling the lamps of heaven. There have been volcanic winters and desert veils, years when travelers navigated by the sound of their animals instead of by Orion's belt. And there are tales, older still, of a silence in the sky that came not from stones or dust, but from a turning in the world's hidden heart. 3 nights, then light, but not the same light. The traveler lays his pack on the salt and sits with the calm of someone who has learned not to hurry mystery. The plain is pale enough to hold a memory of dusk long after dusk has left. He expects, by habit, the first star in the west, that familiar herald whose punctuality feels like a benediction. But the place remains unmarked. The sky is not clouded. It is simply without, a deep slate, evenly poured, stretching to every edge. Some believe there is a sound to starlight, so fine the ear cannot separate it from silence. If so, tonight that music has drawn a veil over its mouth. The desert, which often answers with 1,000 small voices, grain against grain, beetle under crust, the feathery step of a lizard, releases only one tone now, low and oceanic, as if the earth is listening too. He breathes with the plain. He lets the absent stars become a presence. It is not fear he feels, but a grave attention, the kind that kneels on its own without command. He thinks of shepherds in ages when shepherds knew more of the sky than most kings. He thinks of watchmen on city walls who looked for signs in Orion's rise and in Sirius's bright blade. He thinks of builders who fixed temples to certain dawns, certain declinations, trusting the sky to keep its appointments with their altars. What did they do on nights like this, when the great calendar withdrew its numerals? Perhaps they listened for other clocks. Perhaps they learned to count by breath. The traveler closes his eyes because tonight the sky offers nothing that the eyes can hold. In the dark, behind the dark, he finds an older map. There, constellations hum without being seen. A hunter who is more posture than person. A river that does not need to shine to remember its curve. A sailing god whose boat is the arc of a rib. He finds the zodiacal path as a soft warmth along the forehead, the slow wheel of precession as a faint tug on the bones of the face. This is not science. It is not science. It is the body agreeing with the night. Perhaps, he thinks, the dunes do not only remember what was buried, they remember how it felt to live. A wind rises and dies, rises and dies. Salt clicks faintly under the smallest ripples. Far to the south, lightning mouths a silent word without voice, too distant to be heard, the argument of other lands. Above, the slate dome does not change. It is not hostile. It is not kind. It is simply complete. Some believe such nights are thresholds, that the world blinks, and in that blink old alignments loosen their knots and new ones learn to tie themselves. Temple corridors that have waited centuries for a precise star might find themselves subtly unmoored, the beam of dawn arriving a heartbeat to the right of where the craftsman foretold. The sky remains, but its grammar alters, gently, like a tide rephrasing the shore. To those who live by calendars carved into stone, this is scandal. To those who live by breath, it is instruction. Do not ask permanence of what is made to move. The traveler lies back upon the salt. It is cool as a kept promise. He spreads his arms and lets his ribs become a small colonnade beneath the smooth weight of night. Without stars, the distance between being and not being feels thinner, as if the membrane between worlds had been rinsed and lifted. He feels the steady work of the heart. He counts not to measure time but to make it soft. In 12, out 12. A second clock opens, one that does not live in the sky or in the wrist, but in the place where the two are married. He remembers a tale told to him by a scholar with chalk on his fingers. "The sky you love is not the sky your great-grandmother loved," she said. "The earth leans and wobbles with a patience almost comic. The north drifts. The bright ones change their stations over long rooms of time. We live inside these slow turnings the way fish live inside currents. Some nights, the current shows itself." Then she smiled and erased a line as if to prove that disappearance can be a form of teaching. He opens his eyes expecting the same unbroken dark. Instead, he discovers a faintness. Not a point, not a star, but a low wash, like ash diluted with milk. It lies along the ecliptic in the west, a tender brightness a traveler might mistake for a distant village. The old ones called it the zodiacal light. Sun dust, comet dust, the soft war of particles lit by a sun already gone. On most nights, it is a prelude no one notices because the orchestra drowns it with louder instruments. Tonight, with the orchestra silent, the prelude speaks. He sits up and watches the faint wedge breathe. It does not grow quickly, but it learns the sky a little more. He thinks of all the things only absence allows. The whisper heard when the crowd falls quiet, the bruise seen when the lantern is lowered, the shallow well's last sweetness tasted when the bucket scrapes stone. Without the star's bright parentheses, the sentence of darkness can be read for itself. Out of the salted silence, a small procession of memories arrives. Nights on other roads when the Milky Way draped itself like a shawl across the shoulders of mountains. The smell of goats, of dust, of oil. Constellations braided into stories so the children would not fear the great roof. Names folded into names until the sky was a village of kin. He lets them come and lets them go. Tonight, the story is different. A roof without lamps. A village asleep with doors open, trusting the dark to be a neighbor. Midnight passes without a clock to witness it. The wedge of dust dims. The slate regains its even hand. The traveler begins to suspect that nothing more will happen and that this is precisely what is happening. The lesson is not in spectacle but in the not happening itself. He smiles. The desert has done this to him before. Then, without warning, a line tears the sky. Quick, silver, clean. A meteor so swift it seems ashamed of its own beauty. He does not gasp. He nods. Even a starless night remembers how to write itself, briefly, where we can read. A second stroke follows, softer, as if the hand has grown shy. Then the page is smooth again. The wind rises again, soft, circular, drawing invisible patterns over the sand. He can almost hear a rhythm. Not quite music, not quite speech. A lullaby of dust. The desert, ancient and infinite, hums in its sleep. It is said that when the stars withdrew in the old tale, people went out of their houses and stood together in courtyards, speaking softly as if not to wake a sleeping god. Some sang, not to bring the lights back, but to keep by sound what the eyes could not keep. Others told stories without pointing at anything. Stories about ash suns and wandering beasts and a boat that sailed a dark sea with no pole star to guide it, yet found land because the oars kept their rhythm. A few knelt. A few slept. In the morning, They looked at each other as if returned from a shared country. The traveler rises and walks to the low line of a dune. He climbs it slowly, counting the crests like steps in an unseen temple. From the top, the salt plain lies behind like a sheet of tarnished silver. Ahead, the dunes take their quiet shapes again, soft ribs, sleeping lions, the long backs of whales turned to sand. He stops and listens for the dune's voice, that dry purr when grains begin to slip. It comes, faintly, and settles into his chest. He thinks of the rooms beneath the horizon where people tune their breath. He thinks of the wells that echo a human note back as comfort. He thinks of the caravan that carried a song without words through the night. The stars can choose absence. The earth continues to hum. Perhaps that is the covenant, that when one choir rests, another sings. Toward the east, the slate lightens almost imperceptibly, the barest surrender. He remembers that dawn in the desert is always gradual, even when it seems sudden. There is a color the sky tries on before it decides to be blue. He watches for it as a friend listens for a footstep on the path. It arrives, not pink, not gold, but the translucent gray of breath on a mirror. With it comes the silhouette of the far dune line and, above that, something that could be the hint of a planet. Not a point yet, a presence the eye does not quite dare to call by name. He no longer wants the star-crowded shout. He wants the patience of return. A bird writes a short word over the ridge and disappears. The salt plain rests, the slate thins, and there, at last, without fanfare, a single star kindles in the high west, belated, defiant, as if it had been hiding behind the dark deliberately. The traveler does not applaud. He bows his head in the old way to what chooses to reveal itself. Another light follows near the eastern rim. Not a star, but the tender lantern of a planet waking before the sun. The balance shifts. The night loosens. The bowl lifts. Still, most of the sky remains pure, uninscribed slate a little longer, as if reluctant to surrender the gift it has given, the gift of nothing to hold. Perhaps it was never meant as a warning. Perhaps it was a lesson in how to see when there is less to see. The traveler understands he will carry this night like a cool stone in the pocket, something to turn with his fingers when the sky is crowded and loud, when the world insists upon constellations. Somewhere far away, a faint glimmer flickers. The traveler blinks. Is it firelight or moonlight caught on stone? He cannot tell. He begins to walk toward it, though every step feels slower, dreamlike, as if he is walking into memory itself. He thinks of builders who will step into their chambers tonight and find that the old beam of light misses the altar by a breath. He hopes there is someone among them who will smile and say, "So we learn again," and adjust not only the stone but the heart. The heavens are faithful to their motion, not to our measurements. The sacred, too, prefers verbs. The plain behind him regains its ordinary brightness. The first edge of the sun lifts like a coin from under a door. The traveler feels the night closing like a book that has been read aloud to the end. Not concluded, but paused, to be taken up another time. He turns once to the west where the last lonely star lingers and offers a farewell more kin to breath than to speech. If you pass through such a night in your sleep, do not light a lamp. Let the great roof be roof. Sit upon whatever plane your life provides and listen for the other clocks. The one in your throat, the one in the wind, the one in the salt. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Some skies must fall quiet so that we remember how to belong to them without asking to be dazzled. By full day, no one would guess the heavens were empty. Trade will resume its patient arguments. Animals will find their water. Travelers will set their course by landmarks of stone. But somewhere, in the cooled archive of the world's memory, the night that lost its stars will be catalogued under lessons in seeing, placed beside how to hear a well and how to follow a caravan that leaves no prints. The page will carry no author. It will smell faintly of salt and dawn. And the next time clouds crowd your evening, think kindly of them. They are only practicing the old art of veiling, reminding the eyes to lean on other senses. The stars are not offended. They are still where they belong, whether you see them or not, patient guardians who know that sometimes the holiest ceremony is not the lighting of lamps, but the choosing of darkness that lets our breathing be the brightest thing in the world. The desert opens to a plain the color of old bone, and the traveler knows, before he sees it, that he has arrived at a place where the earth remembers water. The wind is different here. It carries a taste that is not sand, not dust, but something faintly sweet and metallic, like a shell pressed too long against the tongue. Underfoot, the ground is not giving dune but hard limestone veined with pale threads, as if some great hand had combed strands of salt through stone. It is said that this quarter of the world once wore a blue garment. A shallow ocean lay here when mountains were younger and the horizon was a softer word. In its warm, greenish shallows, coral built its slow cities. Fish stitched their bright errands from reef to reef. The moons were closer, and tides braided the shore with a patient thirst. Then the earth leaned, the waters retired to other rooms, and the garment faded to bone and light. Some believe the ocean did not leave entirely. It placed small ambassadors in the rock, spiral shells, ribbed fans, tiny star-marked creatures, so that the land would never forget the taste of salt. The traveler has seen such embassies before, vertebrae of whales stranded in a valley of sand far from any tide, the scalloped lips of fossil clams wedged in a cliff like old prayers, the chalk of ancient seabeds powdered under the heel into moonlit dust. But he has not yet seen what waits here, at the edge of a shallow basin shaped like a great palm. The entrance is ordinary in the way doors to the sacred often are low, narrow, starless. Two stones lean toward each other like elders consulting the weather. Carved into one is a line of small eyes, into the other a wave. The traveler kneels, touches the marks, and feels beneath them a coolness that is not merely shade but a memory stored in the stone. Water having been, water having left, water promising nothing but its own logic. And then only darkness. He lowers himself and enters. The air is different, dense and sweet, edged with a mineral dampness that clings to the tongue. He lights his small lamp, and the darkness accepts it gently, as a host accepts a guest who arrives with his own bread. The passage descends in a curve, not a straight line, as if imitating a path taken long ago by a creature without feet. The walls, pale, porous, glitter with tiny mica and the ghosts of shells. Here, a spiral no larger than a fingernail. There, the segmented feather of a crinoid. Farther on, the perfect ripple of what might have been an ammonite worn to the idea of itself. He brushes a thumb along a ridge, and the grit that comes away tastes of the sea's old alphabet. It is said that people long before the ink of history chose to cut their rooms in limestone because limestone keeps memory. It drinks water, holds it, gives it back in whispers. In such rooms, a human breath seems heavier, more tender, as if the air wishes to keep it. The traveler breathes slowly, the way one enters a chapel. Lamp flame licks the soft ceiling and reveals small swells where drops once hung and hardened into stone. The passage turns again, and the floor slopes to a threshold shaped like a mouth exhaling. He steps inside the chamber and stops, not from fear but from courtesy. Even the lamp seems to lower its voice. The tomb is a circle gently domed, with ribs of coral limestone rising like the inside of a shell. The walls are not plastered smooth. They are left as they were found, a reef turned to stone. In the soft glow, the traveler sees whole constellations of tiny fossils, star-like forms clustered like pale flowers, the ridged backs of bivalves, the delicate lattices of once-living architecture. In the center of the floor lies a sunk basin lined with polished stone, oval as an eye. It is empty, yet his own breath returns from it with the faintest lilt, as from the rim of a sleeping pool. Across the far wall runs a relief only time could carve. A wave, mid-crest, captured in rock. Not art, not design, the movement of water translated into geology. But around it, the hand of people has worked. Someone has traced the crest with a finger dipped in soot or resin. The black line still clings in shallow gutters, stubborn as a tide mark. Beside it, the faint incisions of a boat, more curve than craft, bear a small dot at the prow. A lantern? Passenger? The traveler cannot say. He prefers not to say. It is said that in places where the sea has left, the living learn to remember for it. They keep rituals that taste of salt, prayers that move like tide, songs with refrains that pull the body forward and back. The traveler has heard such songs in lands far from this one, where oars keep time better than bells. Their rhythm rises now from the chamber's quiet, low, circular, inevitable. He lowers to sit near the basin and holds his lamp so the flame leans toward the floor. The light reveals a narrow groove circling the basin's inner rim, a subtle channel. He lifts the lamp away. The groove darkens. He lifts the lamp again. In the shifting glow, he notices 4 small holes bored at the basin's compass points. He imagines threads drawn taut there, or reeds laid across to make a net of shadow. The room transformed into a clock whose hands are light and breath. Some believe this tomb was not for a king but for a map, an oceanic memory carved into stone so that when the world turned toward thirst, people could descend and stand inside the sea's body the way one stands inside a story. If so, the map is not a picture but a sensation. Coolness, echo, the feeling of the chest rising to a rhythm older than speech. He dips his fingers into the basin though it is dry. The stone is silky where hands have touched it for centuries, smoothed into a kindness. He places his palm flat and waits. From the wall opposite, a drop falls. So faint he would have missed it if his breath were not slow. It lands somewhere in the rock with a sound between note and memory. The dunes move again, slow and soundless, covering his footprints. By dawn, the wind will have erased every trace. The lamp shows more. Low niches ring the room, each containing a small object. Not jewelry, not treasure. Relics of an oceanic lexicon. In one, a string of tiny shells, spires with mouths like eyes, threaded on a tendon now hardened into gold-brown line. In another, a piece of coral, antlered and delicate, burned along one edge and polished along the other by many fingers. In a third, a flat stone incised with a spiral that tightens almost to closing and then opens again, as if remembering to breathe. In a fourth, a small jar sealed with pitch. He holds the jar to his ear and hears nothing. He does not break it. Some things wish to remain their own silence. It is said that long ago, when the lake that fed this land's gardens finally went to air, the last keepers carried here small waters in cups. Dew gathered at dawn, tears, the leftover rinse from washing the dead. Not to resurrect the sea, but to remind the chamber how water moves upon stone. They poured along the basin's groove so that the room would hear a thin river whisper around its own eye. Perhaps on certain nights, solstices, the marriage of moon and horizon. A shaft of light came through a cut above, found the oral channel, and drew a shining ellipse that circled the empty bowl like a migrating shore. The traveler rises and drifts, as one does when moving inside a lullaby. He runs his hand along the reefed wall. The texture is a field of tiny catechisms. Why do you harden? Why do you soften? Why do you build? Why do you release? He stops where the wave has been traced and lays his palm upon it. The soot marks are almost gone, but enough remains to smudge his skin. He brings the scent to his nose, the faintest spice of resin, the ghost of a fire used with restraint. Light factual threads lift like dust in his mind. He has walked a valley where whales lie in their second sleep, their spines counting time like beads. He has stood on a cliff where the rock breaks clean to reveal a city of shells caught in the act of breathing. He has read of seas with names that sound like lullabies, the Tethys that once lapped at deserts to be, the lakes that swelled and faded on the Sahara's breast, the megashores that walked inward and withdrew, leaving rings like growth on the earth's trunk. He lets these facts rest where the chamber asks them to rest, as quiet agreements beneath the story, not as proclamations above it. He circles once more and kneels at a niche whose object is a long, shallow spoon carved from bone. Whale? Camel? Its bowl worn to a satin from many liftings. On its handle, someone has cut 5 lines, for close together, one apart. Not a tally precisely, a habit. He holds the spoon and senses a ceremony. A drop drawn from the air to become a mouthful of remembrance. A child touched on the brow. A stone anointed so that it would go on being stone a little longer. From the ceiling, another drop falls. It lands near his lamp and dies in a flash of brightness. The air has cooled. The flame's small sun trembles and leans toward the basin as if drawn there. He lowers the lamp to the floor and sits again, cross-legged, hands open on his knees. Some believe the dead were brought here not to be kept but to be taught, to sleep in a room where the earth's earliest lullabies still hum, so they would remember which way to travel in the dark. Others say no bodies were laid in this chamber at all, that it is a tomb only in the sense that it holds what is always dying and always returning: water, breath, light. The traveler is content with both beliefs. The room approves of both. He closes his eyes. The tomb breathes. It is not imagination. The pressure shifts, almost imperceptibly, with his own inhalations. The chamber and his chest share a small ocean between them, and the tide runs on that single syllable, ah, rising, falling, circling the basin, touching each niche with its round hand. Into this rhythm, images arrive the way fish arrive in a shallow at dusk. Slow, curious, lit from within. A mother hoses sand from a child's ankles at the last beach of a lake that will soon be wind. An old man turns his boat upside down and runs his palm along the keel one last time. Not to fix anything, only to say thank you. A woman holds a cup beneath a roof edge at dawn, catching the night's last coolness, then carries it in both hands down a stair cut inside the limestone body of the world. She pours around a stone eye and hums a round, low note. The note returns, and the chamber remembers. When he opens his eyes, the flame shows itself smaller. He stands, stretches his back, and lifts the lamp until its rim warms his wrist. If there is a star cut above, as in the undertemple, it has been veiled by the centuries. Yet he feels the moon even here, like a thought you cannot place but cannot refuse. He looks for an exit sign that is not a sign at all, only a subtle current in the room's shape. The passage he came by offers itself again. Only the whisper will remain. At the threshold, he hesitates. The basin waits behind him, oval and patient. He has nothing to pour. He considers his breath, the only water he carries. He walks back to the basin and exhales slowly over it, again and again, until the stone feels cooler under his hands. He presses his palm flat. In the small silence after breath, the chamber returns a faint sweetness, limestone's answer to devotion. He leaves the spoon where he found it, the jar sealed, the coral untroubled by his fingers. At the wave he wipes his soot palm on his scarf, leaving a dark, generous smear that will fade and join the old line. One more tide mark in the ledger of hands that have agreed to remember. The passage coils him upward. At its mouth, night has dressed the basin outside in a pelt of starlight. The sky seems close, as if it too had descended and now rises with him. In the cool air, the world smells of stone, of a memory washed and wrung and hung to dry. He stands at the entrance and looks back. Wind is a careful custodian. It has already begun to draw a soft veil over the low mouth with combed sand. He does not protest. Doors to the sacred close themselves. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it only wished to be visited by those who could listen to a room that has learned the grammar of tide. The traveler knows he will carry this chamber not as a landmark but as a weather, that taste of salt that arrives on certain winds, that softness in the bones when a long note is held. He begins to walk. The limestone plain gives way to the first hesitant dunes, then to deeper, warmer sand. Over his shoulder, the entrance subsides into the evening like a seal slipping beneath a dark sheet of water. He does not turn again. The sea may be gone, but it has decided to dream here, and some dreams ask to be left alone in order to continue their work. If you pass this way in your sleep, you may feel it, the cool, oceanic echo rising from beneath your feet, a small tide turning in your chest for no ordinary reason. Do not be quick to name it. Let the body answer first. Press your palm to the ground the way you would greet a friend through a door. Hum if you can. Listen for the faint drop inside the stone. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Some tombs do not hold the dead. They keep the shape of water. It is said that the desert remembers everything, but it tells its stories only to those who are willing to listen, and even then only in silence. And some deserts, star-marked and veiled, can still smell faintly of coral at night, as if the earth, even in its thirst, remembers how to dream in blue. The horizon is a silver blade. Beyond it, the desert seems to pause, as if the earth itself stands at the threshold of remembering. The traveler walks there at dusk, following no path, guided only by the faint pull that has carried him through the long corridors of silence. The air is still, but there is a different stillness here, a stillness that listens. And then he sees it, a solitary arch rising from the sand. Not grand, not towering, but impossibly complete. Two pillars lean inward, meeting in a curve so perfect it feels like an act of mercy. Beneath the arch, the sand is darker, not from shadow but from memory. No footprints lead toward it. None lead away. It is said that such gates mark places where time folded back upon itself. Moments that refuse to end or refuse to begin. Some were built by pilgrims who sought to cross into remembrance, others by kings who wished to seal their own names away. But the oldest gates, like this one, were not built at all. They appeared. The traveler stops at a distance, the way one pauses before a sleeping animal. The gate looks simple, bare stone, uncarved. Yet when the wind passes through it, it makes no sound. The desert, always so fluent in whispers, grows tongue-tied in its presence. He circles slowly. From the west, the stone glows amber. From the east, it cools to gray. He notices faint lines etched along its inner rim. Not symbols, not script, but grooves as if brushed by thousands of hands. Each touch, a small erosion, a memory smoothed into silence. He wonders who first placed their hand there, and who was the last. As the first light spills across the horizon, the dunes breathe once more, endless and serene. Somewhere beneath them, a city dreams of light, waiting, perhaps, for another wanderer to listen. It is said that long ago, travelers who crossed beneath such arches left their names behind, not written, but forgotten. They believed that memory itself was a burden that weighed the soul down, and that true passage could only happen in forgetting. They called this place Bab al-Nizyan, the gate of forgotten footsteps. He approaches. Each step sounds softer than the one before, as though the sand itself hesitates to mark him. By the time he reaches the base of the arch, his footprints already blur behind him, vanishing into the low light. The stone breathes cold. He places his palm upon it. Instantly, the world grows thinner. The wind falters, the horizon bends, and a deep tone hums, low, resonant, like the first vibration before sound becomes song. He closes his eyes. The air thickens, not with heat, but with memory returning from somewhere far beneath speech. Faces rise like reflections on water. A woman pouring oil in the temple beneath the horizon. A caravan walking through the dusk without end. A monk unrolling a scroll that spoke of breath. Wells singing to each other under the dunes. They are not visions, they are echoes. When he opens his eyes again, he is no longer certain where the desert ends and the air begins. Beneath the arch, the light trembles. Not golden, not silver, something between both, like the color of forgetting itself. And the wind, soft and eternal, carries a single word through the ages. He steps closer. The hum deepens. For an instant, the gate looks different. Taller, older, its surface carved with scenes half erased. Pilgrims bowing, a river curling around a sun, a figure carrying a lamp into darkness. Then, as if shy of being seen, the carvings fade, leaving bare stone once more. The traveler stands at its center. Beneath him, the sand feels weightless, as though the ground remembers the ocean that once lived here. The arch frames the horizon perfectly. Through it, the world appears softer, unburdened. He remembers the old words, the ones carved above the temple doors in another land. Leave what is heavy. He breathes in, and with the exhale, he lets go not of things, but of the small shadows he carries. The names, the years, the need to know. The desert takes them as gently as water accepts a drop of rain. A faint wind stirs. It passes through the gate, and for the first time it makes a sound. A long, soft sigh that sounds almost human. He turns his head slightly, and for an instant he hears footsteps. Not ahead. Remember, not behind. Just beside him. He does not turn. Some companions are meant to remain unseen. It is said that those who walk through this gate never truly cross it. The arch is not a doorway but a mirror. On one side is the world that remembers. On the other, the world that forgets. And in the space between them, the traveler learns that remembrance and release are the same gesture performed in opposite directions. He takes one step forward. The hum dissolves. Light returns to ordinary color. The wind remembers its language. He turns to look back. The gate is still there, half shrouded in drifting sand. For a heartbeat, it seems smaller. Then, as the sun slips lower, it loses its shadow entirely, as if deciding to become horizon rather than object. The traveler sits a while, letting the silence settle around him. He traces the shape of his footprints, what's left of them, and watches them fade. Somewhere, he remembers reading that the word threshold once meant to tread lightly. That seems right. There are maps that guide you to places, and then there are maps that guide you to silence. He takes out his journal and writes a single line. Some doors open not to let you in, but to let something go through you. He closes the book. He does not mark the page. When he finally rises, the desert is blue with twilight. The gate stands quiet, indifferent, eternal. He walks away slowly, each step absorbed into the softening earth. By the time the stars return, there is nothing behind him but smooth sand. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it was only ever meant to teach the world how to forget itself kindly. As night deepens, the dunes hum faintly. Not a song, not an echo, but the rhythm of all that has passed through the gate of forgotten footsteps and learned to walk without leaving a trace. And if, one night, you dream of walking through an arch that holds no shadow, do not resist. Step softly, carry nothing, breathe once for all you've lost, and once for all that still follows. For some thresholds are not crossed, they are remembered. This one was of the latter kind. And some footsteps are not erased, they simply become part of the wind. The wind is older tonight. It moves not as weather, but as witness, slow, deliberate, unhurried by the ages it has carried. Beneath its voice, the dunes shift with a kind of purpose, and the traveler knows. This is where the long path has been leading all along. He stands at the crest of a ridge, where the sand folds like silk, watching how the moonlight gathers in hollows. The night is pale and endless, and yet there, in the rhythm of the dunes, a pattern forms. A geometry not drawn by wind, but by memory. Lines, arches, a faint grid that the eye can almost mistake for chance. It is said that in the first age of thirst, when the rivers left and the world began to dry, there was a city that refused to flee. Its people believed that if they stayed long enough, the sand itself would learn to remember them, that their streets would survive as wind's own handwriting, invisible yet everlasting. Some called it Alkamar, the city of the moon. Others, Afaris, the city that slept beneath the wind. Asterisk. No map has ever claimed it, yet every traveler who listens long enough feels its breath. The traveler descends into the hollow. The sand sinks softly beneath his boots, not collapsing, but shifting, as though accommodating him. Each step leaves a print that immediately fills itself again. The air grows cooler, the night thicker, and beneath it, he begins to hear something strange, the faintest murmur. It was found in the corner of a monastery library, beneath a cracked tile and a veil of ash. The parchment was stiff, its edges singed, as though it had survived a small and deliberate fire. The ink had faded to the color of desert wind, soft, almost invisible. When touched, it flaked like memory. Not the hiss of wind, the sound has rhythm. Intervals, pauses, the cadence of a language that forgot it was a language. He kneels, presses his ear to the ground. The sound deepens, becomes almost melodic. A slow, rising pattern that hums beneath the surface. He digs lightly with his hands, brushing away the fine dust. There, the corner of a stone. Then another. Then the perfect curve of a stair descending into sand. The moon leans closer. He lights his lamp and follows the steps down, not far, just enough for the air to change. It smells faintly of rain that never came. His flame licks a wall carved with shallow lines. A crescent, a river, a figure kneeling before a rising shape. Dust turns to skin under his fingertips. He feels not as though he has entered a ruin, but a dream, one the earth has kept alive through repetition. The stair ends in a chamber without ceiling, a bowl scooped from the sand. Along its edge, fragments of pillars stand like teeth worn smooth. At the center, a circular platform gleams faintly, its stone marbled with mica that catches the lamp's light in veins of silver. Around it, the ground is furrowed with long, sweeping arcs. Not cracks, but marks of movement. At first glance, it was a ruin of lines. Crooked rivers that led nowhere, mountains drawn like breath, and circles where cities should be. But when the light fell at a certain angle, hidden beneath the dust, another layer revealed itself. Faint symbols, too fluid to be words, too deliberate to be chance. He lowers the lamp and sees them clearly now. Footprints. Thousands of them, preserved as if pressed yesterday. Small, large, bare, sandaled, animal, human, layered one atop another until the floor becomes a sea of remembered motion. Each step faces inward, toward the circle. None lead away. It is said that when the last sandstorm came, the city's people gathered in their square and stood until the wind learned their names. They closed their eyes, lifted their faces, and waited for the dunes to cover them, believing that the breath of the world would continue where they stopped. If we become the sand, one line of their old hymn said, then even silence will remember how to speak. The traveler steps onto the platform. The moment he does, the murmuring deepens. The air hums around him, through him low, resonant, filled with the vibration of centuries exhaling at once. The lamp's flame bends sideways, though there is no wind. He looks upward. The night sky above the open bowl is not empty. It swirls faintly, as though mirroring the pattern of the footprints below. For a heartbeat, it feels as if he stands at the center of something vast and breathing, a lung of the earth inhaling the stars themselves. The traveler closes his eyes. He does not ask for visions. He allows them. He sees flashes, not sharp, not narrative. A woman hanging linens that ripple like sails. A boy tracing spirals in wet sand. It is said that this was the last remnant of an unknown geography, a cartography of myth that traced the veins of a vanished world. Scholars in later centuries called it the Map of Echoes, though its maker's name was long forgotten. Some believe it was created not to depict land, but loss, a record of what had already disappeared. A priest standing upon this very platform, arms raised to a wind that carried no storm, only song. He sees walls lined with thin reeds, a fountain whose basin gleamed like glass. He hears bells, low and steady, tuned to the rhythm of footsteps. The images fade, but the rhythm stays. He realizes the sound beneath him, the hum, matches the pattern of walking. Slow, deliberate, circular. The city, even buried, continues to walk in place. The dunes rise and fall in time with it, the wind an unseen choir. He kneels and places his hand flat on the platform. The stone is alive with vibration, subtle, like a heartbeat in sleep. He lets it enter his wrist, his arm, his chest, until he feels it within his ribs. The city is not dead. It dreams. And in dreaming, it breathes through those who listen. It is said that the sand never truly buries. It remembers in motion. Each grain carries a fragment of shape, a whisper of a name. When the wind blows in the right direction, those names gather, forming structures invisible to the eye but palpable to the soul. Perhaps that is what the traveler feels now, the architecture of memory rebuilding itself from silence. He rises slowly, lifting the lamp. The wind has grown tender. It does not roar. It exhales. The dunes at the edge of the hollow begin to shift again, as if stirred by the same pulse. And in that motion, for an instant, the illusion becomes complete. A tower of sand straightens like a spine. The monk who found it could not sleep for nights afterward. He wrote in his diary, "An avenue opens between two ridges. A faint glow threads the horizon where no moonlight reaches. And at the heart of it all, this square, this circle, this rhythm. He watches, unmoving, until the wind finishes its thought and lets the dunes fall back to their rest. The city vanishes, but its echo remains. He sits upon the platform, the lamp guttering beside him. The flame makes no protest. It flickers once, then steadies. He understands now that the city was never lost. It was simply living at another speed, slower than centuries, faster than stone. The desert did not swallow it. It folded it inward, into the quiet heart of the earth where movement becomes memory. He writes nothing this time. He only whispers. It changes when I close my eyes. What I remember by day is not what I see by night. I see you. The hum beneath the sand deepens, acknowledging. Then, as gently as a sigh, it fades. Above, the stars shimmer. A small wind combs the sand smooth again, erasing his footprints one by one. He does not resist. Erasure, he now knows, is another kind of remembrance. When he stands, dawn is bleeding through the eastern sky. The dunes shine like glass. The basin behind him is level once more, an unbroken sea of light. He walks away slowly. Each step disappears. Each breath feels lighter. It is said that when the traveler finally left the city beneath the wind, he carried nothing with him. Not relic, not proof, only a quiet rhythm that matched his heartbeat. And sometimes, when he stopped to rest, the air around him would shift, and sand would stir, forming small, perfect circles at his feet before vanishing again. Perhaps the city had not slept at all. Perhaps it had only taught him how to listen to its dream. Perhaps that is how all maps work, not as directions but as reflections. By the time the sun crests the horizon, he is gone. The desert lies calm and endless, its dunes rising like waves held in prayer. And beneath them, the wind continues its slow hymn, a breath that has never ended, a song that has never needed words. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And some cities never die. They simply choose to sleep, waiting for someone gentle enough to dream beside them. The traveler has gone, though the dunes still seem to hold his shape. Morning unfolds quietly, brushing the horizon with a hand dipped in gold. The world looks unchanged, the same wind, the same light, and yet something has shifted, the way a room feels different after a prayer. It is said that journeys like this one do not end. They dissolve. That when the last step fades, the road continues inward, into the pulse, into the breath, into the place where silence learns your name. The desert, too, begins its slow exhale. Grains move, ridges soften, yesterday's footsteps sink back into the great remembering. Somewhere beneath, the wells hum faintly. The temple rests in its cool shadow. The caravan continues through its corridor of night. The sea-dreaming tomb listens for another drop. The gate waits, patient as bone. And deep beneath it all, the city still breathes, steady as sleep. The traveler from the dunes, the same who once walked where the wind remembered, found himself years later before this map, drawn to it by rumor and longing. He had grown older, quieter, his hands now trembling with reverence rather than curiosity. He sat by candlelight, tracing the fading ink with his fingertips, feeling the rhythm of its creator through the cracks. Above them, the wind opens like a vast book and turns a single page. It reads aloud not in words, but in rhythm, the rhythm of dust, of heartbeats, of the long and endless walk between forgetting and faith. Perhaps this was never a story about ruins at all. Perhaps it was always about listening to what endures when everything else is gone. If you close your eyes now, you may hear it too. The quiet inhale of the earth beneath your ribs, the echo of footsteps you never took, the warmth of places you have never seen, and the ancient, steady breath of a world that remembers us kindly, even when we forget ourselves. So rest now. Each line felt alive. The rivers curled like serpents, the mountains bent like folded parchment, and near the bottom corner, almost invisible, a phrase written in a language lost to all but sound: follow the breath of dust. Let the wind finish the tale in its own tongue. Let the sands draw their veil, soft and endless. And as sleep folds around you, carry only this: that somewhere, beyond all noise, The empire beneath the sand still dreams, and its dream is gentle enough to hold you. He closed his eyes, and in the silence, the parchment seemed to exhale. Outside the monastery walls, the desert wind began to rise. Dust swirled through narrow corridors, carrying the scent of rain long gone. Somewhere in that wind, he thought he heard a whisper, faint, familiar, like the hum of the dunes. The traveler rolled the map open fully and placed it upon the floor. In the flicker of candlelight, its surface shimmered. Not gold, not ink, but something between both, as though the dust itself had memory. Slowly, patterns began to emerge, forming shapes of valleys and forgotten cities. One shape drew his gaze, a circle surrounded by spiral symbols, marked by what appeared to be a small flame. He remembered hearing stories of this place, an oasis that once existed near the edge of the Sahara, where 3 rivers once met. Ancient writings call it Zerzura, the city of birds. To some, it was myth. To others, it was the last beacon of an empire that refused to die. It is said that those who sought Zerzura rarely returned, not because they perished, but because they found what they were not ready to understand. The Bedouins tell of white stones glowing beneath the moon, and doorways carved in the likeness of wings. They speak of voices that echo across dry wadis at night, calling travelers by name. The traveler's eyes lingered on the mark, and without realizing it, he began to hum. It was the same low tone that had risen from the desert itself years ago. A sound that was not sound, a memory that was not his. He gathered his belongings at dawn, rolled the map into a tube, and began to walk east, toward where the paper led him. Though east and west have little meaning in a land of shifting light. Days blurred into haze. The desert stretched in every direction, vast and whispering. By the third night, his boots had worn thin, his voice gone hoarse from speaking only to the wind. Yet the map, though fragile, remained whole, as if protected by the very dust that sought to erase it. Then, on the 7th evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, the air changed. A faint scent, wet stone, salt, something ancient, drifted past him. The ground darkened, the sand damp under his feet. He lifted his gaze and saw it. A shimmer, a line of light where no light should be. He unrolled the map. The symbols pulsed faintly, aligning perfectly with the horizon before him. It was not pointing to a place, it was becoming the place. The map, drawn in dust, had led him into itself. He stepped forward. The air thickened, as if it were alive, and he found himself descending, though there was no visible slope. The dunes folded inward, forming a bowl of shadow. The sky above turned still, a dome of silver silence. Then, before him, something vast emerged. A pattern carved into the ground, stretching for miles. Circles, spirals, lines connecting like veins of a sleeping creature. It was no mirage, it was written into the earth itself, a colossal design only visible when seen from the height of the stars. In that moment, he understood. The map was never meant for the eyes, it was meant for the soul. The ancient ones, whoever they were, had drawn their cities not upon the land, but beneath it, a network of memory engraved into the bones of the earth. The lines on the parchment were merely the echo of these buried veins, drawn centuries later by someone who could still hear the hum. He knelt at the center of the spiral and brushed away a thin layer of sand. Beneath it was stone, smooth, cold, and etched with the same symbols. At its core, a hollow, circular opening. He leaned close. No sound, no wind, and yet, a faint vibration, steady as breath. Somewhere deep below, the earth was still remembering. He sat there for hours, perhaps days. Time dissolved. The stars moved, or perhaps he did. He began to see things not with his eyes, but with the soft perception that comes when the world grows quiet. Flashes of temples by rivers, figures draped in white linen, hands carving symbols into clay, voices singing to the rhythm of the tide. A world that once was, and might still be, folded beneath the dust. When dawn finally came, the traveler rolled the map once more. But now its lines had changed. What once were faint sketches had vanished entirely, leaving only dust and silence. He understood. The map was complete. Its purpose had been fulfilled, not to reveal a place, but to remind him that all knowledge returns to silence. He rose, turned back toward the horizon, and began walking. The desert behind him shimmered faintly, as if exhaling. The wind lifted his footprints, carrying them away grain by grain. In the distance, a storm brewed, gentle, golden, like the sigh of the earth. When it passed, the dunes would rearrange themselves once again, and no trace of the path would remain. But deep beneath the shifting sands, the lines still hum, the ancient veins of the forgotten empire, pulsing quietly in the dark, their rhythm slow and endless. And somewhere, in a monastery untouched by time, a shelf still waits, empty, quiet, patient, waiting for another map to find its way home. Perhaps it will. Perhaps it already has. For dust never truly settles. It only remembers, softly, endlessly, through the silence between stars. Night thins to pearl on the edge of an empty plain. There is a feeling here, as if the earth once held its breath and never quite exhaled. No ruin rises against the horizon. No broken arch greets the dawn. Only a hush, star-marked and ancient, where the desert lies as smooth as unopened parchment. If a city once stood, its name has been folded inward, pressed into the quiet between grains of sand. It is said that there was a city of pillars in this quarter of the world. High columns like date palms turned to stone, streets that ran straight as prayer, courtyards honeyed with incense. Travelers spoke of a gate stamped with a spiral sun, and of lamps that burned with perfumed oil along a market road. Some called it Iram, city of the pillars. Others murmured Ubar, the Atlantis of the sands. Bedouin elders, remembering by firelight, did not say its name at all. They drew a circle on the ground and let the smoke speak. No siege toppled its walls. No ash drifted down like winter. One morning it was simply gone. A breath withdrawn. A word unspoken. Stone, steps, water jars, all surrendered to a silence so complete it felt like obedience. Some believe the city's foundations were set upon a veiled ocean of limestone and salt, riddled with chambers the desert keeps to itself. Over years, patient, sacred, slow. The hidden rooms widened, the ground hollowed, and one quiet night the city folded into the earth the way a tent is taken down at dawn. Others say the dunes, guided by a celestial wind, walked inward like monks and covered every roof, every threshold, every name. In both stories, the end was soundless, as if the place had the courtesy to leave without waking anyone who slept. The traveler comes at first light, led by a line of dry wadis that once braided toward an old caravan route. He has learned to listen for what is not there, the echo that does not return, the breath the land does not take. He kneels where the sand lies a little lower, where a curve seems too deliberate to be wind. There is no shard, no bead, only the feeling of a threshold, faint as remembered incense. Parchment is unrolled in his mind. He sees the city as it may have been. Pillars pale as moon milk, a colonnade lifting toward the dawn, the cool exchange of copper and frankincense beneath reed canopies, the smell of resin and dates. A woman in a white mantle pours water from a clay jar, and the jar leaves a circle on the stone. A small wet moon. A boy runs, sandals scuffing, a tethered goat knocking against a step. Far gates open to let in a caravan. Beads of dark shapes strung along the horizon, bells trembling at the animals' throats. A scribe lifts his brush, and the moment becomes a line. Breath to ink, ink to memory. It is said the city prospered on the slow river of perfume that moved from the southern mountains to the northern temples. Resin bled from frankincense trees, tears gathered in baskets, traded for copper, for linen, for the blessing of distant gods. Along the incense road, wells were kept like vows, guarded by watchtowers whose shadows marked the hours. The city of pillars was such a vow, a resting of the road, a place where fragrance turned to coin and prayer. Yet the desert listens even to the hum of coin. When the winds changed, or the rains did not come, the caravans chose other tracks. Sand filled the ruts. Doors were left unlatched. A city can be as mortal as a breath. There are stories of seekers who came looking long after the last lamp went out. Some followed star maps scratched into bone. Some trusted a voice heard in a dream. A few returned, bearing hesitations more than news. They spoke of broken ground, of circles pressed into the limestone like the negative of a pillar's foot. One gave the traveler a small polished stone, warm as a held memory. "It is part of a column," she said, "or perhaps part of a story about a column." She smiled the way one smiles at the sea. In our own century, when the world learned to see with eyes that fly, pale lines were traced across satellite images, tracks converging like the spokes of a wheel upon a dot of emptiness. Old maps whispered in their margins. Footsteps in the sky, answering footsteps on the earth. A ruin in the Oman desert was named, a fortress revealed where the sand thinned to stone. Some celebrated and said the riddle was solved. Others breathed more quietly. Perhaps a gate, perhaps an echo, perhaps the shadow of a city that learned how to hide. Not all answers wish to stand in full sunlight. Some truths keep the posture of a dune, beautiful because they shift. The traveler walks the plain until the noon light pales to silver. He finds a depression in the earth shaped like a bowl where rain once visited. Beneath a thin skin of sand his hands touch crusted salt. A taste of an ocean that has gone inland and learned to sleep. He imagines pillars marching here, their bases sunk into a floor now melted by time. He imagines a sinkhole opening with the patience of centuries, not as a catastrophe but as a ceremony. The city returning to the underworld it had borrowed from, the way a story returns to silence when the storyteller bows. It is said the pillars were carved to resemble date palms, each fluted trunk crowned with an invisible frond of sky. The stone was veined with light, pale as the belly of a dove. Scribes recorded waits and blessings, births and journeys, in a script that curved like wind-blown ripples. The temple's inner room was without window and without sound. Lamps burned at the corners. A single bead of resin smoked as slowly as a prayer. There, in the thick, honeyed air, one might have felt the city's true heartbeat. Not the clamor of trade, but the steady rhythm of waiting. Some believe a judgment fell, that pride ripened into ruin, that a celestial decree sent the sand to do what armies could not. Perhaps, there are times when a city's story turns like a page no hand can hold. Yet the desert does not gloat. It covers with a gentleness that can only be called mercy, smoothing the sharpness of endings until even grief becomes a dune.